Alison Caldwell reports.
On Tuesday night, 18-year-old Numan Haider went to the Endeavour Hills police station where he met two members of the joint counterterrorism team outside in the car park. He stabbed them both several times before he was shot and killed. Victoria Police Chief Commissioner Ken Lay says they now have reason to believe Haider wasn't alone.
There's some information that he was certainly talking to other people around the time that he came to the police station face to face. It is really unclear as to whether at the time or just before he had other people with him or not, but certainly it's certainly something that we're pursuing. I won't say working with him, but it's just a little unclear to us at the moment whether there was actually people at the police station with him, whether they dropped him off, whether they were waiting for him.
Ken Lay has also confirmed that police visited Haider's home earlier on Tuesday and searched his bedroom without a search warrant.
It's true that we had been to his place earlier that day to set up an appointment to have a chat with this young man. We certainly were at his location with another person who I believe was a resident of the room as well.
The Chief Commissioner also dismissed claims Haider intended to behead the police.
There's been lots of speculation out there in the last day or so. What you just mentioned is absolute speculation. I'm not aware of any evidence that would suggest that that's correct. We do need to be really, really careful of making suggestions, and often these quite outrageous suggestions which are, to my knowledge, not based on any fact.
Meanwhile, concerns have been expressed about the way some Muslim leaders have questioned whether Haider actually stabbed the two police officers before he was shot. The Islamic Council of Victoria's President Gaith Graham had this to say yesterday.
I will remind you again that this incident occurred because the police invited him to attend. This wasn't him going to the police station to take some action. The police contacted him, they wanted him to come in for an interview, and he agreed to attend. I think we need to be very careful what dots we join here. We don't take two and two and create 2,000 out of it.
This morning, the former president of the Islamic Council of Victoria, Yasser Solomon, tried to explain this, but at the same time also seemed to question exactly what happened in the moments before Haider was shot.
Look, if it's as alleged in the newspapers and as publicly described, of course you have to condemn it. Who goes to a police station with a knife, if this is a true account? I think it's maybe wise in some circumstances just to hold back and allow the facts to actually be finally resolved and reported on. And that's why perhaps some of the various Muslim leaders have just backed off from fully condemning or labelling the 19-year-old man.
Many people are still asking how a healthy 18-year-old Muslim man from Melbourne southeast could become so disaffected. Yasser Solomon thinks generation gaps in the community may have something to do with it.
There is a disconnect between this group of youth in the community and the mainstream leaders. I think many of these youth have turned their backs on the local leadership for a long time, and they're getting their influence from overseas through the internet and through other means. And we would have no idea, and perhaps even the families of these people would have no idea what they're communicating with, and that's part of the big problem that faces everybody here.
Sydney-based Hassan Saleh is the founding president of the Australian Federation of Islamic Councils. He's fallen out with the current leadership of the Federation. He says they've allowed extremist imams from overseas to fill the gap.
The community generally becoming aware of what's happened and losing respect for the leadership, and then young people turning to these fascist imams who, unfortunately, they're only a small minority, but unfortunately have ended up attracting a following. Most of the imams are people that have migrated to Australia, and unfortunately, a lot of them don't have any formal education.
Meanwhile, the Victoria police officer who was stabbed in the arm has had surgery and is said to be in a stable condition in hospital. The Australian Federal Police officer who was stabbed in the head, neck and body has had surgery and is expected to have more surgery, but is said to be in a serious but stable condition.
Alison Caldwell. Here through ABC Radio.
Okay, well, as you can hear, it's raining on the roof. But I think I can talk loud enough and the phone's going to be able to record well enough that maybe we can have a bit of a discussion. My guess is that the Victorian Police and the Federal Police and ASIO and probably ASIS as well are all pursuing the hypothesis that young fella who took himself to the police station as a response to having his room searched without a warrant earlier that day may have been seen speaking with somebody before he actually made his final close approach to the police station. If that is so, allowing for the fact that a senior ranking Afghan Australian officer of ISIL, Islamic State of Levant, has apparently called on all disaffected Moslem members of the Islamic diaspora all over the world in all the Western countries to immediately attempt to kill military personnel, police, citizens, anybody in Western countries, and they mentioned Australia by name after beginning with a list that started with the United States, Britain, the hated French, they said. Now, they hate France because Napoleon conquered Egypt and the entire north end of Africa with a Mediterranean coast. So it's interesting to note that in Algeria, which once upon a time was a French colony, they've just killed a Frenchman. Somebody over there, allied with ISIL, has acted on the demands of the fatwa. So the big worry is that this Australian Afghan ISIS senior officer called for Australian disaffected Muslim malcontented Islamic diaspora adolescent angry young men to attack somebody in Australia on camera so that the video footage, video record of the event could then be spirited, smuggled, transported, couriered, delivered back to the Middle East so that it could be incorporated into some propaganda. So we all know that mobile phones have cameras in them. Some of them have good cameras, some of them have bad cameras in them. We also know that mobile phones can download to a USB stick and they're pretty ubiquitous. We also know that mobile phones have things called micro SD cards. And these micro SD cards carry the memory of the footage produced by the camera. So without giving away any secrets, my guess is that right at the moment, the entire spy versus spy, paranoid, anti-terrorist security industry is trying to stop something about that size, easily smaller than the smallest coin issued by the Treasury. I don't know what you think, but I guess when you consider the volume of airmail traffic around the world leaving from Australia, the chances of preventing the footage from a mobile phone from being physically transported out of the country by somebody who's determined to do it would be somewhere around minuscule to zero. If hypothetical people made a hypothetical video record of whatever it was that happened out the front of that police station, and if the hypothetical people with the hypothetical video record were intending to get it out of the country, it's already gone. It won't have gone electronically, it will have gone physically out of the country. They've probably got copies of it. But once again, if that's what's happened, it's an example of the security industry, people who are paid to worry about all the possible threats that may perhaps face the nation which they work for, whether they work for America or England or Canada or France or Australia. All of these professionally paranoid individuals are constantly several steps behind the people that they're trying to catch up with. My attitude to the whole event is that we're dealing with two broad bunches of individual humans, the Western industrialised secular democracies of the world, who are saying that anybody who wants to fight for God or their interpretation of God is obviously wrong. They're also saying that the so-called self-proclaimed Islamic State of the Levant are not true Muslims. And that to me, it's like a Confucian claiming that a Presbyterian is not a true Christian because you've got to be a Lutheran or a Baptist in order to get the doctrines correct. But to decide who's a true Muslim and what's a true Muslim, I think you should really ask the Islamic scholars. And I find it really difficult to understand the reasoning of my Prime Minister, who says that we have to go to war and kill the troops and supporters of the Islamic State of the Levant because they are fighting on the side of anti-God. And because they have an interpretation of God that says they're allowed to kill people, then we have to prove them wrong by going over there and killing them. Because Tony Abbott's such a staunch Christian that he follows a religion that has a commandment that says thou shalt not kill. Now, I know there are people who are going to say that the commandment is thou shalt not murder, and I'd say poppycock. To murder, as my co-subscriber, the English lawyer in Hartlepool, has assured me, murder means to kill secretly. To kill in public view is homicide. To kill without intending to kill is manslaughter. But in either of the three cases, thou shalt not kill. It doesn't really much matter whether you meant to kill, whether you meant to kill in broad daylight, or whether you meant to kill secretly. It's still killing. Thou shalt not kill. Now, it's beyond my comprehension why anybody who says they're a Christian can justify going to war for politics. Going to kill somebody else because you don't think they're living up to your ideas of what you think the God theory says they should be doing. Especially when the people you're trying to kill are saying precisely the same about you. The leaders of ISIL are targeting Western industrialised democracies because when they were simply, in their eyes, acting on their territorial prerogatives of kidnapping strangers and demanding ransom, the government of America and France commenced airstrikes on ISIL encampments and ISIL, vehicular columns in Iraq. And now they've extended that to Syria, and they've taken along their token Saudi Arabian, their token Qatari, their token Jordanian Air Force aircraft, to fly along and say, oh, look, see, there's one of us and 300 of them, and therefore it's a multinational task force. Yeah, and the latest from President Obama is that he's got the United Nations to pass a resolution calling on all members to forbid members of their country from travelling overseas to fight with ISIL. So you've effectively lit a fire under the Islamic diaspora all over the world. There's going to be malcontented, angry young men who are now not allowed to leave their country to go and fight in their version of a great adventure. It's just beau geste, only speaking Arabic instead of French. Damn, I hate it when telemarketers ring me up while I'm in the middle of making a YouTube movie. So yeah, in conclusion, I think the West should back off and sit on their sidelines and wait for ISIL to run out of spare parts for their Humvees. And maybe NATO should put pressure on Turkey to stop buying the oil at $3 million a day from ISIL. Warbles, I'd like to YouTube. Ciao.